Well, this is with the South Dakota State Medical Association. I want to welcome everyone to this presentation, Physician Resiliency, Healing the Healer, and Who's the Healer? This presentation is brought to you in partnership with MMIC and is our final program in this series. Please go ahead and put all lines on mute to try to prevent the background noise. However, we will open up the lines presentation for sure so we can have some questions and answer period. At this time, go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Lori Drumella, and I'm going to her to introduce herself and then go ahead and lead us through tonight's discussion.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning into this webinar. My name is Lori Drumella. My background is in emergency medicine. Spent 20-plus years practicing emergency medicine west of Minneapolis, and near the end of my tenure there, I was lucky enough to get a fellowship grant to study integrative medicine. So I did a 2-year fellowship, mostly online, at the University of Arizona, and learning about other healing techniques that could be used in addition to traditional allopathic approaches to chronic disease, pain, depression, anxiety. And so some of this work comes out of that study, and I just have a keen interest in physician burnout and stress and the fact that we need to address it. This talk really is kind of a parallel talk, or I'm going to be talking about some parallel concepts, because burnout and resiliency really impacts individuals, but it also impacts teams and systems, and there is no one silver bullet to approach this. And I want to be abundantly clear that physicians as a whole who are experiencing a lot of burnout professionally and ultimately bleeds into our personal lives are very resilient at baseline and tough people, but we've come to a place in our careers and healthcare where we're really experiencing undue stressors resulting in this epidemic of burnout. So not only are there going to be some tools recommended for individuals, but also I invite you as not only practicing clinicians, but those of you who have opportunities to engage in leadership roles to consider how this might be approached from a higher level organizational view, because I think that's ultimately where we have to engage leadership to make a difference. So any conflicts of interest or financial interest in this, I tell you that from MMIC's perspective, which is a large malpractice insurance company, I'm their chief medical officer, I've been in this position for 4 years, that we definitely do see a tie to physician or addressing resiliency as something that is connected to the communication that happens, the kind of care that's delivered. It impacts patient experience. It impacts retention and longevity of career. And we are a company that was formed by and for physicians, and so we really want to advocate on behalf of physicians that this is an important issue that needs to address. So I've been out banging the drum on this wherever I can to administrators and other people who be able to advocate for this, addressing this issue. So I just thought I'd mention that. So for tonight, we're going to talk about these objectives, list the findings of recent research on physician burnout, stress, and resilience promotion, identify how physician burnout may affect healthcare organization and patient safety, and then there'll be some effective methods for building resiliency skills, not only in yourself, but potentially in your organization. And I hope that each of you can leave this with a few ideas that you can incorporate into your own life and your own practice that you might use for yourself, you might use for your patients or coworkers or others that you interact with. This is a picture of an ER doc that was around social media in the spring of 2013, and I don't know if any of you have seen that or remember it, but essentially this was a picture of a doc who's had lost a patient, and one of his friends, he went outside kind of for a breather. This is, I think, in L.A., went out for a breather, and his friend happened to shoot this picture of him and got his permission to share it on social media. But this is what the doc said. I worked on him until he died, and then outside and got down and cried. And then I got up and went back inside and tried to feel better so I can make other people feel better. And I like this photo because it's so candid. There's nothing staged, nothing artificial. There's none that remarkable. It's a stolen moment, really. But thanks to his friend that captured it and then that was shared, it gave us kind of some insight into what a lot of us deal with in medicine. As I said, my background's emergency medicine, and I can certainly relate to some of these feelings, and I think all of us who went through medical training can relate to sometimes the anguish we feel when things don't turn out the way we'd like to go. But this reminds us of what we're all about, and I could use this term of heavy boots. That was a term that was used in the movie after 9/11, when there was a little boy who was trying to make a connection with his father. His name was Oscar, and his father had perished in 9/11. And he was trying to make a connection with his father, and he'd said that he had heavy boots. And I think about medicine and the responsibilities and commitment that we make to becoming physicians and the things that we're a part of or witness to. And that's a professional mantle, as I call it. And since, as have evolved over the last 15 to 20 years, it seems that there are more and more things being put onto a profession that already had heavy boots. So things like more challenging workflows and EHRs and more forms to sign and things to comply with. And so I think that's partly, and based on research, why we're seeing some of this epidemic of burnout is that we already had heavy boots, and they've gotten so heavy to the point now that, it's breaking. So I think we can make an argument just in terms of patient safety for why caring for healers matters. I'll get into the definition of burnout, or at least the classic definition, but we know that burnout and emotional exhaustion result in reduced capacity for empathy. And when we have these things together, they reduce patient satisfaction. And we see an increase in medical errors, an increase of malpractice risk, and increased mortality rates. There's lots of research that makes these various ties to these, and some of these studies are noted on the slide. But suffice it to say that you can imagine that if you're burned out, or if you yourself are seeking care from somebody, you've got about a 50% chance of somebody sitting across the table from somebody that's burned out if you're a patient, or vice versa as a physician. And you feel that difference. You feel if somebody has reduced empathy, or is exhausted, or feels like they're really not making a difference. That impacts communication and understanding, and ultimately, if something goes wrong, it impacts a patient's liability to seek legal recourse, or even upstream from that to contact you with concerns if they didn't feel communication was going well in the first place. So burnout is something that is very prevalent right now, and there's been some serial studies to show that it's increasing. It starts in medical school and continues throughout the various stages of a medical career. 50% of medical students and somewhere between 30 to 75% of residents, depending on the specialty, experience burnout. And then outside of training, now it's on average 55% of docs they have at least some of the components of burnout. So as a profession, we have higher rates of burnout, depression, and suicidal thoughts than professional peers. Most other professions, say if you take lawyers or PhDs or administrators, as they get educated, their work satisfaction and their work-life balance increases. For physicians, the more educated they get, more they have problems with depression and burnout and suicidal ideation. So we're different that way. three components to burnout. This is the classic burnout measurement tool. It's called the Maslow Burnout Inventory. It was developed in the early 80s, and it is comprised of these three components: depersonalization, and I think we all as physicians can recognize how we can fall into that trap, referring to people like either as a disease or a body part. In the emergency department would be like, you know, what's going on with the ankle in room 5 or the belly pain in this, you know, room 8 or something like that. So depersonalization. And, you know, I think we've been trained to think that depersonalizing has benefits and that, you know, we don't over-identify and, you know, we stay objective. But if we get to the point where we're really not considering these people as human beings, that ultimately can be wounding to us who went in medicine to heal people, help people. So depersonalization is one. Emotional exhaustion is another, just not being able to handle one more burden or listen to one more story. Then a sense of low personal accomplishment. These all lead to decreased effectiveness at work. So Dr. Shanafelt is from Mayo Clinic in Rochester, and he has done two really good reviews on physicians, surveying them for the measures of burnout as well as work-life balance measures. And if you look at data from 2011, you see that almost 60% screen positive for intermediate or high on emotional exhaustion, and depersonalization was about 50% for intermediate or high. 8% of the respondents, and this was based on a nationwide survey of almost 7,300 physicians across all specialties. So 38% had a positive screen for depression, and 6.4% had thought of suicide in the last year. And as an aside, you may know that about 100 physicians commit suicide every year, which again is higher for our profession than most other professions. So Dr. Shanafelt did this survey in 2011, and he recently published in December of 2015 his survey that he conducted in 2014. And here you can see for emotional exhaustion that the higher proportion of physicians that screen positive in the high range. The intermediate range was about the same, and the low was slightly less, and which makes sense, of course. And same thing for depersonalization. More people were positive for depersonalization. The positive screen for depression went up to 40% from 38%, which is pretty significant when you think about that. And 0.4% thought of suicide in the last year. So these are impressive findings, I think, and this has been referred to as a public health crisis by a lot of experts in this field. So recognizing and acknowledging it probably and measuring it is one of the first steps to say this is a real phenomenon that's happening in our country, happening in other countries too, but it is real here in America. So if we look at the slides of burnout by specialty, the gold line is gold lines are 2011 and the blues are 2014. Emergency medicine is the top at about 70%, and then urology, which is interesting, climbed to number 2. PNR, number 3, family medicine, number 4, radiology, orthopedic surgery, and so on. What's intriguing to me is that dermatology increased by 24 percentage points. If you look at that's near, looks like around 10, but that's increased significantly. PNR, pathology, and radiology all increased by 15 percentage points, and most average increased by 10 percentage points. So I'm going to just compare these. These are the top specialties that they measured. And you can see that every single one of them increased. And the one with the red line, if you look on the left, that average just 50%, about 55%. So everything was increasing in the wrong direction. As you all probably know, there's a cost related to physician burnout. Productivity loss, not when somebody is just showing up and not being productive, but also when somebody gets burned out to the point that they quit or leave, that impacts productivity. There are recruitment costs, there are costs to the people that are left behind. Satisfaction is impacted by burnout, and it impacts willingness and ability to engage on quality improvement and other patient experience initiatives when people can't keep up. The cost to replace a single physician really depends on specialty and geography, obviously, but it runs anywhere from the $200,000 to $1 million, probably, or more, to replace a physician. So this is got a significant cost to it. NFL did research in 2002 surveying residents about patient care. So these are some data from residents who screened positive for burnout, and this is self-reporting how it impacts patient care. He did a similar study on surgeons that was published in 2009 that showed similar response rates. But you can see on these questions about discharging patients because the team was too busy, didn't fully discuss treatment options or answer patients' questions, made treatment or medication errors not due to inexperience, or medication for an agitated patient before evaluation, or discharged patient rather than perform diagnostic tests. These are things that these residents screen positive for on this survey, which are, concerning. When you look at the residents that are screened positive for burnout and the amount of care that they deliver across the country, you can see how this can be tied to preventable deaths that are estimated in the 200,000 to 400,000 patients a year category, many of them untreated, unworked up problems for which their deaths could have been preventable, which has a cascading effect if people realize that's an outcome of how they had treated their patients. This one that really bothers me at the soul level, because if you ask physicians, what is that may decide to choose medicine? What is it that motivated them to go into medicine? And I speak about this all the time out with groups of physicians, and physicians will raise their hands and say, I'm into medicine to help people. I want to help people. I wanted to serve. And so these survey questions about from asked of residents who were screened positive for burnout, if you look at paid little attention to social or personal impact of illness on the patient, had little emotional reaction to patient's death, felt guilty about my treatment of patient from a humanitarian standpoint, are issues where somebody's work, their day-to-day work, starts going alignment with their mission and meaning and purpose, why they chose medicine, why they chose that profession. And when that happens, there's this really inquiry at the spiritual soul level for people, which ultimately leads to further feelings of distress about practice. And Parker Palmer is a guy who's written a lot about this gap between what is and what you want it to be, and it's very difficult for people to live with that on a long-term basis. So people do make medical errors. There's significant emotional impact related to that. And this study by Waterman was based on a survey of 3,100 physicians in the U.S. and Canada, and 92% of these physicians were involved in medical error. 50% report job-related stress and anxiety about future errors. 10% of people in errors felt supported by their organizations. But you can see that when people are involved in medical errors, and maybe it's a result of burnout or not, has big impact. So physicians are concerned about their reputation. Their job satisfaction decreases. They develop sleeping problems. They develop a loss of consciousness, and up to 60% develop problems related to anxiety. I'm asked this question: do physicians are we different in terms of our personality? And several psychiatrists and others that have commented on physicians' unique personalities, and we do tend to exhibit obsessive-compulsive personality features, including perfectionism, preoccupation with orderliness, control, excessive devotion to work and productivity. We have a hard time relaxing, a hard time turning the off switch, and this makes us vulnerable to repeated mental reviews, adverse events. So now in the liability world, we see that people not only worry about these events for the proximate time, but also they worry about the ultimate, like, am I going to get sued? Am I going to have this drawn out in front of, over a long period of time in front of my peers or jurors or whatever? So this causes a lot of anxiety, and ultimately what's interestingly is when somebody's sued, in the months subsequent to that, their risk of making error doubles. So this does impact our decision-making and anxiety. So there's a study by Schwapik who talked about the emotional impact of medical error involvement on physicians. And you can see this tie between error involvement, guilt, frustration, fear, and all of these responses, including burnout, depression, decreased empathy, lead to quality of care and patient safety issues. So this is a well-recognized phenomenon. This slide is kind of interesting. It shows the proportions of a physician's career spent with an open malpractice claim by specialty. And on average, of physicians, they have a 40-year career. They spend about 11% of their career under what I call the cloud of a malpractice suit. And the claims that are paid with indemnity are in blue, are without indemnity. But you can see neurosurgeries on the top. Neurosurgeons spend well over 25% of their career under a practice suit. And that's an awful big burden to carry, in addition to practicing clinical medicine and staying up on things and just the rigors and stresses of that kind of profession. And then you go all the way down to psychiatry, which is, about 3%. But the point is that very few physicians make it through there without being sued, and the ones that do have some adverse impact for that on their personal and professional lives. And we as physicians, for the most part, are not very good at seeking help or helping others go through this because of the shame and really the misinformation about what one can or should do when they might have a lawsuit or are sued. And I do want to make the point that it's true, if somebody's in this situation, the only people you're supposed to talk about the facts of the case with are your claim representative and your attorney, people that where this is protected. But you can talk to anybody you want to about how you feel about these things. So support groups, your spouse, your best friends, your partners, you can talk about how you feel about something, just not the details of the case. We don't want people to think that they have to keep these things bottled up. Interestingly, stress management does reduce errors and risk. And there are a couple studies that were done. First of all, one was done in a large hospital in the Northeast with 700 employees, where they measured stress in the work environment. And what they found is that by educating people on how to manage their stress and by providing an employee assistance program and counseling, they were able to cut medication errors in half. So that was kind of an interesting study. And the St. Paul companies did that study as well. The second one, which was a study of 22 Midwest hospitals where they did the same kind of thing with measuring stress and teaching about stress management and providing employee assistance for people that were going through stress. They found that they were able to cut malpractice claims from 1.4 to 0.4 per year, while rates in the control hospitals remain steady. So there is data to show that stress can impact outcomes. I'll talk a little bit about a paper that was published in December of 2014 in the Annals of Family Medicine by Thomas Bodenheimer. And what he advocated for, and I've been advocating for this, as have others who are very interested in this field, that in order to achieve the triple aim, and so many people are focused on the triple aim, and it's all good: better health outcomes, better patient experience, reduce costs, increase efficiency, the goals, but if we don't take care of our workforce, talk about the quadruple aim, which is provider well-being, we'll only get so far on the triple aim. So to me, it only makes sense that if the people delivering the care are stressed and burned out, having depersonalization, emotional exhaustion, and low sense of personal accomplishment, that's not going to really maximize achievement on the triple aim. So I think that there's a good argument for that. So what to think of from an organizational perspective, whether it's in individual clinics or hospitals or ambulatory surgery centers, that in addition to patient-focused care, which we've all taught about the importance of that, and of course, the patient is very important, but could we add, in addition to how we take care of patients, how we take care of each other and how we take care of ourselves? And this has just sort of been almost a foreign concept to us, but I think that we need to think of that. And what if our organizations will have a metric on our dashboard, whether it's at the board of directors or the C-suite or the leaders in our organization? What if we were to have on a dashboard how our healthcare providers were doing, monitor it, interventions, and then monitor it again and measure it again? So that's one of the things that I'm really trying to bring up as an important concept. So this thing is really to make sure that we make physician health and well-being a priority in your organization. Is it in your mission statement for your organization, your hospital? And if it is, I think there's a strong argument to say if it's missing, that it should be added. So to tell you, physician well-being means to start doing not only measuring it, but asking providers, physicians, nurses, what is that they need, and then providing it. So some of this could be training. There are communication programs, there's empathy programs, there's feedback tools, there's self-care programs. Most of these are not expensive programs, and in some organizations it can be as simple as devoting a room where people can go relax or exercise. It could be providing fresh fruits or vegetables in your cafeteria, but just really starting to show an organizational commitment of caring for the people that are delivering the care. So promoting it in organizations in terms of collaborative cultures, improving communication and quality conversations, teaching some self-awareness skills, and then the importance of care. A bit about stress. So stress is really when what we call the fight or flight response is prolonged beyond an immediate reaction and or repeated. And this is something that unique to humans. And the reason it's unique to us is that beyond the immediate threat of things, we worry. We worry about what could happen or what did happen. And probably the best example I can think of this is a zebra that gets chased by a tiger or a lion. If a zebra is chased and they don't get caught, go back to eating grass. Because we spend a lot of time thinking about what could have happened or what might happen in the future. And grass is a really useful thing if it keeps us out of danger in the here and now. But when it's prolonged, it's not good for us because it results in things like elevated cortisol levels, which really promote inflammation, and they impact our immune systems adversely. So I just want to bring that up about stress. So there's an interesting guy named Robert Sapolsky, and he talks about why zebras don't get others, and it's because of what I just told you. Stress really is caused by a lack of control and predictability. And you think about medicine in clinics or EDs or surgeries, in so many settings, you often feel like there's a lack of control or a lack of predictability. And when this happens, it leads to these feelings of stress. So that's just part of it. I want to talk a little bit about our ability to measure the effects of stress. We now have tools to measure physical changes in the body that are caused or influenced by the mind. And these are things like functional MRIs, hormone levels like cortisol levels, antibodies, heart rate variability. And what we know is that we can measure the effects of the mind and the emotions on the heart, digestive tract, immune system, to the cellular level. And we see that these physical symptoms can change emotional health and vice versa. So it's a really intriguing area of research, but I do want to point out the fact that Sir Oliver Wendell Holmes, who was a physician during the time of the Civil War, noted that victorious soldiers were more likely to survive their war wounds and heal their war wounds than the ones that were defeated. So it's this connection between the mind and emotions and physical healing, the impact on the body, is being proven out in science today. And I'm going to highlight the work of Esther Sternberg, who is a psychoneuroimmunologist. She was at NIH for years. She's a rheumatologist, and she studied the impact of stress on healing. In addition to her, there's a woman named Dr. Janice Kiecolt-Glaser. And what they have found is stress impacts inflammation, the immune system, healing. What's interesting from the Kiecolt-Glaser and her husband, who's a physician, Dr. Glaser, they took two groups of people, and in one group had the stress of taking care of somebody with Alzheimer's disease, lived with somebody with Alzheimer's disease, and the other one were age-matched controls. And then they induced wounds on their forearms, kind of about the size, partial thickness wound with about the size of a cigarette burn. And what they found is that the people that had the stress of caring for somebody with Alzheimer's in their family, in their homes, healed their wounds on average 9 days later than the age-matched controls. They've done research around the strength of the immune response to vaccines, which is if he's in a stressed group, they make less antibodies to a vaccine than somebody who is not stressed. Dr. Richard Davidson at the University of Wisconsin in Madison gave vaccines to people who meditated, were meditation, and ones that didn't. Ones that meditated had increased response to vaccines, so their immune system was actually improved, the function improved. Dr. Kiecolt-Glaser also did research on enhanced susceptibility to infectious illnesses. So people that were stressed versus non-stressed, if a rhinovirus was put up nose kind of with a nasal applicator, people that were under stress were more likely to get the rhinovirus a cold than ones that weren't stressed. And I think all of us kind of can relate to that. When we're sleep deprived, when we're under stress and a patient coughs in our face or whatever, we're more liable to get sick. If you think about zoster and the herpes virus, what is it that elicits that latent virus? It's stress. There's a definite connection between stress and healing, immunity. Research by Dr. Elizabeth Epple at UCSF is interesting. She she looks at chromosomes at the cellular level, and very pink tips at the end of the chromosomes are called telomeres, and they protect our genetic material. And what's interesting about her research is that you look at groups of people, and in her case, one of her studies is comparing parents of children who have chronic, serious medical diseases. They're on ventilators, feeding tubes, require lots of medical care. The parents compare the cells and chromosomes of those parents that don't have similar stresses with their children are on average 10 years older in appearance, except for a subgroup of parents which feels grateful for the children that they have, even though they may have significant diseases or chronic medical conditions. They feel grateful for what they have brought into their lives and what they're teaching them. So we can even see at the cellular level that stress results in cellular aging and poorer health. So I'm going to switch over here to some talk about resiliency, and this is where I want to leave you with a few tools that you can use on a personal basis, again, with patients or family members. So when we talk about resiliency, really what is that? It's an individual's ability to overcome adversity and continue his or her own normal development. And as a whole, we are very resilient people, and I want to make that point, but everybody's got their breaking point. I think a lot of us have hit that. So resiliency really is a function of our ability to cope and the availability of resources related to this. So some people maybe are more naturally resilient, but anyone can work to strengthen their own resiliency. It's really a process more than a trait, but we do need resources to help us with that. So I think, when we look in the mirror, sometimes we don't all see a lion, maybe we see a kitten, but I say to people in all seriousness that if you look at yourself in the mirror and think about what you've accomplished up to this point to be where you are today, to have made it through all of this rigorous training and demands of your practice, we're all very resilient, but we might need to actually take a look at ourselves and say, are we going to fill up? And I think that's really important. How are we going to fill up? If we think of ourselves as containers of energy, we need to fill up, and we need to fill up the gas in our car. So how are we going to do it for us? Because we keep giving and giving without being committed to filling up, we're going to run dry or we're going to hit bottom. And I think, it happens to a lot of us, and it's happening to a lot of us right now in medicine. So I think I have kind of a theory of change, and the first step is to recognize that there is an issue or a problem, and that comes motivation to do something about it. And some people might have to hit rock bottom. Some people might have trouble with relationships or chemical use or whatever. But you first of all have to recognize that it's an issue worth addressing. Then you need some motivation to deal with it, and then tools and resources. So this is I'm going to just talk about a few tools and resources that people can consider using. There's a guy named Brian Sexton, and he works at the Duke Center for Patient Safety, and he offers a great course at Duke, which I've taken, and he also is on the national speaking circuit. But these are the 5 pillars of resilience that he talks about. 1, self-awareness. 2 is mindfulness. 3 purpose, 4 is self-care, and 5 is relationships. And I think some of us in medicine, by nature of what we've done and had to sacrifice, maybe have spent more time on some things than others. And I just want to bring this up as sort of high-level things to think about in your own life or the people that you work with. These are really basic techniques for building resiliency that I'm going to focus on. And it starts with good nutrition and sleep. As is important, I'm going to teach you a very easy breathing technique. Meditation, mindfulness is helpful. A gratefulness journal is helpful. Random acts of kindness are helpful. Support groups are helpful. And some social connection and or spiritual practice about your purpose and meaning and taking time out to think about your purpose and meaning are all important things to think about in your own life. So this is the anti-inflammatory food pyramid. And suffice it to say that more and more data and research is coming out on the benefits of whole fruits and vegetables and whole grains and healthy fats and oils, greener herbal teas, legumes, caught fish, that's been grass-fed, eggs that are fed flaxseed, protein that's healthy protein supplements, and even today in the AMA news where they talk about how research on the impact of sugar was pressed when it came to its impact on heart disease. We know sugar is an inflammatory component or contributor to inflammation. So the anti-inflammatory food pyramid, just the more that we can go for whole fruits and vegetables, drink lots of good clean water, and some of these other things, food matters. And if we think about food as medicine, it can be very good for our health. There's Michael Pollan's book called In Defense of Food. He says, eat food, not too much, mostly vegetables, colors of the rainbow, whole foods, more omega-3s and less of omega-6s. These are, just good nutrition. And then the importance of prebiotics. Also, most of our 65% of our immunity starts in our gut. So really healthy diet and healthy food is very important. This is something that we've, in medicine, have had to learn a lot of in our training and in our practices. So thinking about self-care, why do we sleep? It improves immune function. It consolidates our memories. It regulates our emotions. And interesting, there's a talk out there, a TED Talk by a guy named Jeff Iliff, I-L-I-F-F. He's at University of Rochester. And he and one of his co-researchers have coined this term glymphatics, that it's only during deep sleep when CSF percolates through our whole brain and cleans out these beta-amyloid proteins that contribute to Alzheimer's disease. So at night, you have to have deep sleep in order to get brain cleansing. So that's pretty interesting. We're currently out there. So it's for a better night's sleep. I often quiz people who uses a snooze button. Well, ultimately, the snooze button sort of deprives you of real quality sleep and is kind of an instrument of torture. So we suggest skipping the snooze button, avoiding caffeine within 4 to 6 hours of sleep onset. It's important to get out in the natural afternoon light to reset the circadian rhythms. I think you may remember the suprachiasmatic nucleus that we studied in neuroanatomy, and that has to get light on it through the retina in order to reset our circadian rhythms. Avoid eating within 2 to 3 hours of sleep because digestion disrupts sleep. More exercise is really important and provides boosts of energy, decreases stress hormones, and improves sleep quality. So things for that. to consider. I'll say about exercise, the current recommendations are to move at least 30 minutes with moderate exercise 5 times a week. You may be familiar with some of this work out of the Mayo Clinic where they talk about something called NEAT, N-E-A-T, which is non-exercise activity thermogenesis. Essentially, the more people move, the better. Doesn't always have to be meaning going to the gym, but getting out in nature, moving, climbing stairs, parking far away from the door, using Fitbits, those sorts of devices to make sure that people are getting enough steps in and getting outside, gardening, all are really important. So the next thing I want to talk about is this breathing exercise called the 4-7-8 breathing technique. When you're breathing and focusing on your breath, your mind is in neutral. And this is an ancient breathing technique I'm going to tell you about. It's the only system that you can control consciously and is also unconsciously controlled. But if you breathe 4 cycles of 4-7-8 twice a day, it can help give a little bit of balance to your sympathetic nervous system, which is, all your adrenaline and stimulation, can give a little bit of support to your parasympathetic nervous system, which is calming. So the way this works, and it's very simple, is you quietly kind of upright so you can really take a deep breath. You inhale through your nose for a count of 4. You hold it for a count of 7, and then breathe out through your mouth. And when you do that, your mouth is half open. Put your tongue right between your teeth and the gums, and so you're breathing with half open mouth, and it makes kind of a whistling sound. So it sounds like this. And you completely exhale. So this is stimulating your phrenic nerve, which is part of your parasympathetic nervous system. And I can tell you that if you do 4 cycles of 4-7-8 by breathing in for 4, counting for 7, and breathing out for 8, your pressure comes down, your muscles relax, your heart rate comes down. And if people can do this over a course of do 4 cycles twice a day for a month, some people will actually be able to decrease some of their blood pressure medication, and it's just a calming technique. And this is something I use with people in the emergency department. You could use it for people that are waiting to see you in the clinic and are feeling anxious. Your medical staff could be, and your ancillary staff could be teaching this to patients. And I have to tell you that I've taught this to people in their 80s who have appreciated it, and they use it. So this is just a simple tool that I think is worth teaching and trying yourself. I just want to talk a little bit about the mindfulness, and this is being taught in at least 12 medical schools across the country. There was an article published by Krasner and Jama in 2009 about 70 physicians who were given a course in mindfulness, the course of several weeks, and then follow up over the following year. And what they found is that people who went this course improved their feelings of they had before, and they found that they improved their sense of well-being. They decreased their their feelings of psychological distress, burnout, and it improved their capacity for relating to patients. So they had very good outcomes from this, and this is an example of something you could probably try in your clinic or institution that might be of service. There's a very simple exercise called 3 Good Things, and it was developed by Dr. Mark Seligman, who's really a happiness guru in this country, a lot of books and done a lot of research. And this practice is super simple, and it can be used for yourselves or your coworkers or your patients. It involves taking a journal and putting it on your bedside table, and every night for 10 to 14 days, writing down 3 things for which you're grateful and why. can't do the same thing every day. It needs to just sort of expand your thinking about what you're grateful for. When people do this, post this exercise, their happiness score is increased by 25% and their depression score is decreased by 25%. So it has, it's been well studied that just a simple exercise of writing down 3 things for which you're grateful can have positive outcomes in terms of happiness and decrease depression. Random acts of kindness, the single most reliable momentary increase in the well-being of any exercise. It's been tested, so that's something you can try at work with, surprise, a coworker with a flower or a cup of coffee or something like that. But it makes people feel good, and these are things you could be teaching at staff meetings. Gratitude exercises. I've run out here and. Especially, this is something that you can do as a department or at a meeting of your leaders to have people think of somebody who's done something amazing. The person can be alive or no longer with us. This person contributed to your well-being in a big way. Spend the next few minutes writing a brief note telling this person what they did, how it impacted you, and the benefits you've received. You can take that and call that person or meet with the person or read what you wrote. It will increase your happiness, and it will increase theirs as well. And you can do the same thing with a sense of awe exercises. And I'm just bringing these up so you have some concrete ideas that you could try in your workplace, you can try them in your family, you can just do it personally. But these help people feel better. I'll talk a little bit about the work-life balance issue in medicine. We are a profession of people who have practiced delayed gratification. We're known for that. Work often trumps our home life, and this leads to tension at work, tension at home. We keep thinking that things are going to get better, but we put things on hold. And so I think that we need to think about this as individuals as well as organizations and what are strategies that we can do to minimize that, because it's a significant issue in medicine. I talk about the importance of community, and there are lots of different programs for physicians and nurses to share some of the challenges of this work that we do. And some ideas are Schwartz rounds, there are finding meaning in medicine groups, there are balance rounds, there are book clubs, there are retreats offered by the Parker Palmer Center for Courage and Renewal, the Yoga Institute in New York. The point is there's a lot of things out there for physicians to access, and it's something to consider because of the unique roles that we play. The Dentist says we can live without religion and meditation, but we cannot survive without human affection. Relationships are so important, and a primary factor in resilience is having caring and supportive relationships within and outside the family. These relationships that create love and trust and provide role models and offer encouragement and reassurance really bolster resilience. So think about that. We talk about having a 3 a.m. friend. Brian Sexton talks about the importance of that. And a 3 a.m. friend is somebody that you can call at 3 a.m. to help you move a dead body. That's his definition. And I know what that means. There are things that we all have that are hard or we're embarrassed or ashamed of. And sometimes we haven't taken as much time as we need to not only have a 3 a.m. friend, but be a 3 a.m. friend. So if that's something that is important to you and you don't have it now, that could be something you could think about and strategize for. How can you build a supportive network for yourself? I want to briefly touch on the spiritual practice. I talk about how sometimes people's day-to-day work gets out of alignment with what brought them to medicine in the first place, what drove them to make this commitment of time and sacrifice. And sometimes we get into the day-to-day work so much and we don't think about, from a higher level view, what it is we're doing and how and whether or not our life is really aligned with our greater purpose, meaning. And so that can be found sometimes in a spiritual practice. So thinking about the benefits of that. I want to briefly talk about this book called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. This is a book that was written by Bronnie Ware, who's a hospice nurse, and she interviewed people on their deathbed. These are the things that she found their top regrets. I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. I wish I hadn't worked so hard. I wish I'd had the courage to express my feelings. I wish I'd stayed in touch with my friends, and I wish that I'd let myself be happier. Things to think about for us, our weakness, and are there opportunities for improvement. This is a picture of one of our nurses in the emergency department where I've worked for many years, and she says, Lori, always remember to tell them about the foam in, foam out ritual. And that is when we foam in to a new patient room, we can think about sort of cleansing ourselves from our last patient encounter and coming in fresh and saying a little prayer like, Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace, or may universal life force enable me to treat patients and colleagues with compassion, patience, and respect. So think about this, a little ritual that you can do that sort of resets you. Here of a field, and look at this road through this field, a well-traveled path. And we all have well-traveled paths of habits and behaviors. And the fact of the matter is, some of them haven't served us well. Then it's this sort of virgin field, and I think if we were to start doing some of these things, like the 4-7-8 breathing, 4 cycles twice a day, or try a gratefulness journal for 10 to 14 days, writing down 3 great things for which we're grateful, or saying a prayer before we go in to a patient's room, or exercising on a regular basis, or joining a community of, it's a spiritual community or a book club or something like that. But once, it create a new path for you. But we know from neuroplasticity that we can create new paths. And if we don't use the old paths that were not helpful to us or serving us, they will grow over and we can create new paths. So I'm just going to invite you to think about how you might want to incorporate some of these things into your own life. There's a lot that's going on in healthcare now. We as physicians are going to have to take care of ourselves, but also as physicians who have access to leaders or who are leaders ourselves can play a role in recreating and getting us back to some of the things that are most important to us. So I'm going to close with that. I'm available to hang around for questions or comments, but I thank you so much for your time and attention to this, and I left references for you, so feel free to look them up, and I'll put it back on. If any of you have, contact me. That's my email, lori.drill-melham@mmicgroup.com, and that's my phone number here at work. So feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or comments.
I went ahead and I unmuted all phone lines, and so the few phone lines are open. If you have any questions, we encourage you to please ask. Sometimes the starter is always the hardest one. So, Dr. Drill-Melham, if I could ask you one question, one thing that came to my mind as you were speaking would be, what would be the recommendation that you would have for an organization that wants to start to get into with physicians and trying to address, these of being stressed? Because so often, people are afraid to bring those concerns forward, or they're afraid that there's going to be, radiation for, identifying themselves as being a struggle at work.
So I think probably this is true that most hospital leaders because this is so commonly written about now in the medical literature and the general public's literature, that this is an issue that's going to be that is impacting physicians and ultimately care. That important to engage leadership, and I really believe that there are easy ways to measure what's going on with physicians, whether it's in a clinic. We actually have resources on the MMIC website if you happen to be an MMIC insured, or the AMA has a great website on the AMA website, and I don't think you even have to be an AMA member to get on it. It's called Steps Forward, and this has some tools to actually measure the amount of burnout in your physician population. So first of all, I think you have to measure it. So you see, is it or not? And we do know that it is a problem. And when you survey physicians, you have to give them the results, and you have to ask them about their pain points and do something about it. So this does require leadership to be engaged on this issue. But as hospital leaders and physician leaders are impacted by whether it's retention, turnover, complaints, patient experience, patient safety events, all these different things are motivating to them, because now there's going to be more there's going to be a lot more financial consequences to the results of these issues, whether it's on ACAPS or CGCAP scores, or again, retention, recruiting, those sorts of things. So in Minnesota, our Minnesota Hospital Association just had all members complete a survey of the physician populations, and I've seen some of the results that have come out, but I think that this is something that has garnered a lot more attention as an important issue, as it should, obviously. So my first step would be to engage medical staff leadership and hospital leadership or clinic leadership or whatever kind of practice environment you are in, and say, yes, let's address this, and then survey, see it, meet with people, give physicians, give them the survey results, and then start engaging them in what's important to address in terms of solutions, and then remeasure. I mean, the worst thing about surveying people is if you just survey them and you don't do anything. You do something with the survey. So I think there's a lot of will out there to address this right now.
I think that's an excellent point. There's always that expectation, and a lot of times that gets dropped, that when you members or you survey employees and you ask them what their concerns are, they share that with you. Like you said, there is an expectation of, well, what are you going to do about it? Right.
So very important to act on it. Otherwise, I read an article not so long ago in the Harvard Business Review about surveys, and they say, what keeps people from surveys or answering truthfully on surveys? And they talk about fear and futility. So they're afraid, to your point, Mark, they're afraid of adverse consequences. They're not going to answer it honestly, or if they think it's futile. So it's important, if you do this and engage in this, that you actually have some leadership support. Otherwise, people feel like it's futile.
Sure. Thank you. Any questions for Dr. Drill Mellom at this time? Hearing none, I know, Dr. Mellom, you had offered to actually still have on the screen there, you have your contact information out there. Do you have concerns with anybody following up with you if they have a question they prefer to ask you directly and not in front of the group?
Yeah, I'd be happy to entertain any questions, so feel free to email me or leave me a voicemail. I'd be more than happy to connect with you.
Okay. Throw out there one more time, any questions for our presenters this evening before we come to a close?
drill loans.
Yes.
Question as far as so the idea is starting at the top and seeing practices that would promote resilience, self-care, awareness, et cetera, et cetera. From an efficiency standpoint and the most standpoint, what are like the easiest or the simplest to establish from like a top-down standpoint? Because I feel like a lot of these things that you've given us are great, but I feel like a lot of it is associated with actually people decide, hey, I need to do this myself, and I'm going to do it, versus, I would say, forcing is a little bit extreme, but
yep.
Tell them want to do it themselves. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So, and that's kind of what I was trying to say at the beginning. This isn't just an individual problem. That being said, some of these tools are helpful for individuals working in really trying circumstances. So, as it turns out, when physicians are surveyed about what bothers them the most, it's too much work on them, and it's workflow. And a lot of it is workflow around use of the EHR and documentation, people not being able to do that real time with their patients, and then staying 2 hours after their clinic to get their documentation done. So it turns out your organization, say for example, you survey people and the biggest pain point is workflow, then there have to be discussions among clinicians, administrators about how you're going to address those workflow issues, because that's what it's going to take. So you're right. Some of these are individual tools, but it takes institutional leadership. It happened to work in an institution where people don't care. The state is going to be written ultimately because people won't stay around. There's a physician shortage predicted, and I think physicians in the near future are going to be able to say, we can't do this anymore, because people are retiring early and saying, I can't do it anymore. So I don't know. Does that help?
Yeah, can I further elaborate on my question?
Sure.
So, because you kind of alluded to this, because burnout starts probably grad, then goes into medical school, residency, and it kind of builds on each other.
Yeah.
So for example, from like a graduate medical education standpoint, or even like a medical school standpoint,
right?
Going back to that question I had you from like a top-down thing, like, because I'm sure workflow would be very useful too. But as far as when you're where, like in medical school, students really have no say what they're told to do, or residents have no. Sure, like they have some say, but like if something like told to them from top down, there's very little. There's stacks, but what are, if you thoughts, or I guess research points towards what are things that can be done from that standpoint?
It's really interesting, because when you were first asking the question, what was also flashing in my mind is a culture of respect. It's a respect, and we got a lot of work to do in that culture of respect. Treating people with dignity and respect in our work arenas. And I actually just recently took this Healer's Art course, Rachel Naomi Remen, which talks about the healing arts in medicine versus there's healing and there's curing. And this is actually taught in 90 medical schools across the country. I think there's around 200 medical schools or so. But it's really talking about and acknowledging grief and loss and mystery and awe, and thinking about your purpose, and and kind of creating more of a community of support. I think this is a little bit, some of this is like, entropy, Less people are mindfully addressing that this is important. It spontaneously happen. It just sort of, things go into disarray. And at some point, I think people saying, we've had enough, and this isn't working for us. And how are we going to get back on track? To say that there's more, from what I understand in medical school curriculum, that there's more humanism in medicine now, that it's not quite as abusive as it used to be, but we still ask an awful lot of ourselves, and I think it's going to take people saying this isn't working, and it might mean that it's people with administrators with MBAs actually saying that people are going to pick up because it's not working, and maybe that's what it's going to take in some circumstances to say this isn't going to be sustainable.
Any other questions for our presenter this evening? Okay, and again, Lori, I want to thank you for taking your time to be with us today.
Sure.
We truly appreciate you sharing your knowledge and information with us. And all of our participants at tonight's presentation will be made available online at www.sgsma.org. For those interested in the Category 1 CME credits are available through the Sanford School of Medicine. So when you visit tonight, you should be able to redirect it to the school's website where you can apply for that CME. And then with that, I would also like to remind you of our next session coming up Tuesday, October 4th. We're physician employment issues, and the topic of that presentation is termination of the employment contracts. And that, I also want to let everybody know that we are currently working on another series that will be looking at topics related to MACRA, and so that information on that series will be forthcoming. So again, I want to thank you all for participating. Dr. Lori Dromell, thank you again for your time, and wish everybody a good night.
You're welcome. Thanks for attending, everybody, and good luck, and feel free to reach out.
Thank you.
All right.